Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. Our musical guests tonight are Quiltman and his son T. Good evening, gentlemen. They're going to be opening and closing with some music. Casper Leach is here. Howdy, Casper. We have some film clips. We have a film clip from KATU's show last week, Your Voice, Your Vote. Did the interview there. We'll talk a little bit about it, just show a little excerpt of that. And another video from Jorge Cervantes about cannabis cultivation. So stay tuned as we bring on our infamous Dancing Cannabis Leaves. Right. Our first story tonight is a historic one out of Colorado. Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper on Tuesday signed a historic measure to implement marijuana legalization, establishing the Mile High State as the first legal, regulated, and taxed marijuana market for adults since the United Nations Single Convention Treaty on Narcotic Drugs took effect in 1961. There were several areas, Nepal, parts of India, that were allowed to continue selling cannabis until the 70s, but they all quit selling cannabis legally by the 1970s. Colorado Governor Hickenlooper vocally opposed cannabis legalization last fall when Amendment 64 was on the ballot, saying, quote, "Colorado is known for many things. Marijuana should not be one of them," end quote. But he signed the bills that will start development of a regulatory framework for legal marijuana, as well as for the cultivation, distribution, and processing of industrial hemp. Hickenlooper said on Tuesday at the signing ceremony, quote, "Recreational marijuana really is new territory," end quote. He called the bills common sense despite his vocal opposition in the past to legalization. The governor's chief legal counsel, Jack Finlaw, said although the Hickenlooper administration was opposed to marijuana legalization, quote, "the will of the voters needed to be implemented," end quote. Amen to that, sir. Our next story is a national survey. 3 out of every 4 doctors responding to a survey about medical marijuana said they would approve its use to help ease pain in older women with advanced breast cancer. Doctors had been presented with the scenario in a February issue of the New England Journal of Medicine, as well as arguments for and against the use of medicinal cannabis. They were then asked whether they would approve such a treatment for this patient. The results, which appear in the May 30th issue of the New England Journal of Medicine, show that 76% of the 1,446 doctors who responded said they would recommend that women use medical marijuana. Many said the possibility of alleviating this woman's symptoms was a reason for approving medicinal cannabis. Dr. J. Michael Bostwick, a professor of psychiatry at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, said, quote, "The point of the vignette was to illustrate the kinds of patients that show up on our doorstep who need help. This issue is not one you can ignore, and some states have already taken matters into their own hands," end quote. Another historic couple of states moving forward, both Illinois and New Hampshire have approved medical marijuana, becoming the 19th and 20th state, though it remains to be seen which one will implement the law first. This past week, the New Hampshire Senate approved a bill by 18-6 just yesterday, on Thursday, that would allow state residents with serious illnesses such as cancer, multiple sclerosis, and HIV to obtain and use medical marijuana if their doctors recommend it. The measure will now be sent to the House of Representatives, which is expected to call for a committee of conference to fix errors and resolve differences between the House and Senate versions. The New Hampshire House overwhelmingly approved the bill, 286 to 64. They have a huge House of Representatives in the state of New Hampshire. 286 to 64 on March 20th. But some problematic changes were made in the Senate at the behest of Governor Maggie Hassan and her legal counsel, Lucy Hodder. New Hampshire-based legislative analyst Matt Simons, who works for the Marijuana Policy Project, said, quote, "We applaud the senators for adopting this compassionate and much-needed legislation despite its imperfections. Those suffering from debilitating medical conditions deserve safe and legal access to medical marijuana, and the New Hampshire Senate has once again clearly indicated its support for patients." Again, remains to be seen whether New Hampshire or Illinois will become the 19th and 20th states to approve medical marijuana. And of course, there's also, ironically, the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. And speaking of Washington, D.C., from Washington, D.C., 56% of Americans support legalizing the production of industrial hemp, according to national polling data released this week by YouGov.com and the Huffington Post. Hemp is a distinct variety of the plant species Cannabis sativa that contains only trace amounts of tetrahydrocannabinol, less than 1% by law, the primary psychoactive compound in cannabis. Last week, Oregon Senator Ron Wyden introduced an amendment to the Senate Bill 3240, the Agricultural Reform, Food and Jobs Act of 2012, requiring the federal government to respect state law, allowing the cultivation of industrial hemp. The amendment's language mimics the Industrial Hemp Farming Act of 2013, which also remains pending as a standalone legislation in both the U.S. House and Senate. 8 states have enacted statutorily changes defining industrial hemp as a distinct agricultural product and seeking to allow for its regulated commercial production. Some great news here in Oregon this week. The Oregon House of Representatives on yesterday, passed Senate Bill 281, which adds post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, to the list of medical conditions which qualify patients for the protections of the Oregon Medical Marijuana Act. The bill now heads to Governor John Kitzhaber's desk. The Oregon Senate had already approved the bill last month on a 19-11 vote. If the bill is signed by the governor, Oregon will join New Mexico, Connecticut, and Delaware as the 4th state to specifically recognize PTSD as an eligible condition for medical marijuana. The bill had bipartisan support in both the Senate and the House. Numerous studies have found that marijuana can be an effective treatment for severe PTSD symptoms. At least 20% of soldiers returning home from Iraq and Afghanistan suffer from PTSD, according to a 2008 RAND Corporation study. Patients with PTSD who often have trouble tolerating the side effects of pharmaceuticals prescribed for PTSD indications such as sleeplessness, anxiety, and social isolation find that medical marijuana is a helpful alternative. There's also evidence that use of medical marijuana reduces the risks of accidentally overdosing from traditional prescription drug cocktails. The bill was introduced by Republican State Senator Brian Boquist after a failed attempt to get it added to the Oregon Health Authority. The OHA, formerly the Department of Human Services, oversees the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. This is a great victory for the citizens of Oregon and especially military veterans who are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress and who've not been able to find relief from prescription medications. Military veterans and victims of serious trauma and violence deserve the freedom to choose the safest treatment for their disabling conditions. New Mexico's medical marijuana program is nationally recognized as a model for supporting patients with PTSD. Today, more than 3,700 New Mexico residents with PTSD are actively enrolled in that state's medical marijuana program. Most of them are military veterans, patients living with disabilities, and victims of serious trauma and violent crime. We're seeing the best legislative session for drug policy reform ever here in Oregon, now that we've passed Senate Bill 281, adding PTSD to the medical marijuana program, assuming the governor will sign that, as indications are he will. We also have pending a bill that would legalize dispensaries. There have been a number of arrests in southern Oregon over the past week, and we have a story at the end of this about a man who's sentenced to 15 years. But Senate Bill 3340 in the Oregon legislature, it's actually House Bill 3340, would allow legal dispensaries in this state and regulate that. And then of course there's House Bill 3371 that would completely legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana. More about that a little later. Our next story is from New York. Future research targeting cannabinoids and their receptors may lead to evidence-based treatments for patients diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, according to clinical trial data published May in the journal Molecular Psychiatry. Investigators at the New York University School of Medicine reported that subjects diagnosed with PTSD typically possess elevated quantities of endogenous cannabinoid receptors in the regions of their brain associated with fear and anxiety. Investigators also determined that many of these subjects experience a decrease in their natural production of anandamide, an endogenous neurotransmitter resulting in an imbalanced endocannabinoid regulatory system. Researchers speculated that an increase in the body's production of cannabinoids would likely restore subjects' natural brain chemistry and psychological balance. They affirmed, quote, "Our findings substantiate, at least in part, emerging evidence that plant-derived cannabinoids such as marijuana may possess some benefits in individuals with PTSD by helping relieve haunting nightmares and other symptoms of PTSD." The authors concluded, quote, "The data reported herein are the first of which we are aware to demonstrate the critical role of the CB1 cannabinoid receptor and endocannabinoids in the etiology of PTSD in humans. As such, they provide a foundation upon which to develop and validate informative biomarkers of PTSD vulnerability, as well as to guide the rational development of the next generation of evidence-based treatments for PTSD," end quote. Anecdotal evidence and case study reports have increasingly indicated that cannabis may mitigate traumatic memories and anxiety. However, clinical trial data remains unavailable, in large part because federal officials have blocked investigators' efforts to study cannabis in PTSD subjects. In 2011, federal administrators halted efforts by investigators at the University of Arizona to complete an FDA-approved placebo-controlled clinical trial to evaluate the use of cannabis in 50 veterans with treatment-resistant PTSD. The full text of this study, Elevated Brain Cannabinoid CB1 Receptor Availability in Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, a positron emission tomography study, appears in Molecular Psychiatry this month. It's been known for some time that cannabinoids in marijuana are also neuroprotectants. That is, they help guard your brain cells from damage. Now, an Israeli researcher has uncovered more evidence that low doses of THC, the chief psychoactive component of marijuana, can protect the brain both before and after injury. Professor Yosef Sarn of Tel Aviv University's Adelson Center for Biology of Addictive Diseases at the Sackler Faculty of Medicine said he has discovered that low doses of THC protect the brain from long-term cognitive damage in the wake of injury from hypoxia or oxygen deprivation, common in strokes, drownings. Also from seizures or toxic drugs, reports American Friends of Tel Aviv University. Previous studies had concentrated on injecting high doses of THC within a short time frame, usually within 30 minutes before or after the injury. But Professor Sarn's current research shows that even extremely low doses of THC, about 1,000 to 10,000 times less than the THC found in a marijuana cigarette or joint, administered from 1 to 7 days before or from 1 to 3 days after a brain injury, can boost biochemical processes which help protect brain cells and preserve cognitive function over time. This treatment could be applicable to many cases of brain injury, especially in light of the long time frame for administration and the low dosage, according to Professor Sarna. Sarna and his fellow researchers found that low doses of THC had a large impact on cell signaling, preventing cell death, and promoting neuronal growth factors, or neurogenesis. This led to a series of experiments designed to test the neuroprotective properties of THC in response to various brain injuries. The researchers injected mice in the lab with a single low dose of THC, either before or after exposing them to brain trauma. A control group of mice sustained brain injury with no THC treatment. When the mice were seen 3 to 7 weeks after initial injury, the THC mice performed better in behavioral tests measuring learning and memory. Biochemical studies also showed large amounts of neuroprotective chemicals in the THC group compared to the control group. The researchers concluded that THC can prevent long-term cognitive damage that results from brain injury. Due to the long therapeutic time window, THC can be used not only to treat brain injuries after they occur, but also to help prevent brain damage from injuries that might occur in the future, according to Sarna. For example, cardiopulmonary heart-lung machines that are used in open heart surgery can sometimes interrupt the blood supply to the brain, causing brain trauma. THC can be delivered beforehand to help prevent damage from this occurrence. Professor Sarna is now working with Professor Edith Hutchinson of the Rabin Medical Center to test the ability of low doses of THC to prevent damage to the heart. Preliminary results will indicate they will find the same protective phenomenon in relation to cardiac ischemia, in which the heart muscle doesn't receive sufficient blood flow. Our next story is kind of sad, from down in southern Oregon. A medical marijuana patient and grower whose farms were raided back in October 2011 was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison this Tuesday. Brian Wayne Simpson, who's 40, of Medford, was sentenced by senior U.S. District Judge Owen Panner down in the Medford Federal Courthouse on charges of conspiracy and manufacturing distributing marijuana, according to the Medford Mail Tribune. Simmons was convicted after a 4-day jury trial in December 2012. He owned and operated Brian's Green Thumb Farm in Central Point, Oregon. Federal Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA agents, and the local police raided the farm in October 2011, confiscating 456 large cannabis plants. The agents seized 64 more plants at a second grow site near Medford. Co-defendant Michael Gransky was accused of overseeing the second grow site near Medford, but he was acquitted after a December jury trial. Another co-defendant, Michael Peru, pleaded guilty and cooperated with federal investigators. He still hasn't been sentenced. And there's also the case of Lori and Lee Duckworth, who operate a dispensary in Southern Oregon Normal, and they had been arrested last Thursday, a week ago, and held on $550,000 bail each. And yesterday they were released after the bail was dropped down to $5,000. So it went from $1.1 million to $10,000. And they got out of jail yesterday. We're happy to report and hope they know they will stand up for their rights and take this to trial. I think they'll be acquitted. So that's the end of our Hemp News segment for tonight. We're going to jump over to Quilt Man, who's been very patient. How you doing, Quilt?
Good.
Good. How about you, T?
Good.
All right,
Good.
so they're going to do some music, and we'll be back in just a moment with more exciting Cannabis Common Sense. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Quiltman and T. That's great. Quiltman, our audience, just let's tell them a little bit. You've opened for Jackson Browne, and you're in John Trudell's band Bad Dog. What other great artists have you opened for over your 30-year musical career?
Bonnie.
Bonnie Raitt.
Yeah, she's the first one. Bonnie. The Indigo Girls. Geez, a lot. Midnight Oil.
Tons. I
Bruce
know.
Coburn. Yeah, a lot.
Okay, well, I just want our audience to realize what an honor it is to have you here on our show.
Hey, man, thank you, brother.
Thank you for coming on, and we'll be back with another song at the end of the show as well. I'd like to welcome Mr. Casper Leach. Hey, Casper.
Thank you. It's always an honor to be here, and especially this week when apparently the son, who used to be the owner of the largest hemp plantation in the world, I think, is now, used to be with Microsoft, is opening up a marijuana company that's going to be selling
a brand
of
He's
marijuana
cannabis
around the world, and he made this big announcement up in Seattle with the former president of Mexico.
Yeah, Vicente Fox, the president of Mexico,
and
former executive CEO of Coca-Cola as well.
Oh my gosh! And so I think the people who are up in Washington who like lobby money need to pay attention to these wealthy people who are now starting to do a international brand of marijuana to sell to consumers.
I know they said at first they were going to raise $150,000. Now they said they've raised $675,000, and they wouldn't say exactly what was going. There's some problems with the Washington law, because the Washington law says only people in the state can benefit. So getting investors from out of the state is very problematic under Washington's law.
Well,
their attorney kind of skirted around that in their news conference.
Yeah. Like I said, they got enough money, they'll figure their way around it. And why they are creating
they said they're going to create a new brand called Diego Pellicer.
Well,
and Diego Pellicer was this guy's grandfather, Shively, the Microsoft guy.
Right.
And it was his grandfather.
And I was going to suggest Stanford Sativa. Wouldn't that be great? And Casper Chronic.
All right.
There we go. If you make him after our personalities, his will be an upper, mine will be a nice buzz.
I never thought of it.
That's right.
Now, we are taking your phone calls tonight, so if you have questions or comments for us, you can call us at that number there on your screen, 503-288-4442. It's 503-288-4442. Or if you're watching us online on ustream.tv, you can type something into that little chat box right beside the screen. And if you type it in there and ask them to send us the message as a question, it will appear right here before me, and we'll be able to answer that question here from anywhere you're watching. But, you know, we've had calls from Europe and Africa before, so if you have a question or comment for us tonight, the last day, 31st of May, 2013, then you can call us at 503-288-4442. Of course, I guess on the other side of the line, it'd be the first day of June in Europe right now.
I've got a question. Apparently, there's going to be a $575 million windfall in Colorado from this great hemp crop and all the great hemp laws that they've been implemented. And now Colorado's going to be just raining in money. Aren't the politicians going to be ecstatic about that and won't that keep, what do you call you guys at the DEA? Oh, yeah, you guys at the DEA out of Colorado?
We'll see. I certainly hope so. You know, President Obama has not come out against it, and I think it was about 3 months ago that all the heads of the former alive heads of the Drug Enforcement Administration, which was created out of several agencies, including the Federal Bureau of Narcotics back in 1972, those guys, John Lawn and others, said about 3 months ago that if Obama didn't stop Washington and Colorado from moving forward within 1 month, it would be too late.
Oh, my gosh.
Now it's been 3 months.
Been 3 months.
So it's too late.
Well, maybe you and I can be part of it.
You know, I addressed this in this nifty interview that we'll be playing a little bit later here from KATU's show, Your Voice, Your Vote. So we'll talk about it there. Or I did.
Well, maybe you and I
we have a phone call.
Well, maybe you and I can be part of his joint team that he puts together to help implement that.
That'll be the day, bro. Okay. I mean, boy, wouldn't that be fun?
And you could be the chief man in charge.
I don't know about that.
I'm chiefing.
I don't like that. I think my title, I like Poobah better, not Grand Poobah. I have not assumed and assented to grandness yet, but just a lowly Poobah. That's my title. Anyway, we do have a phone call. Welcome to the show, caller. Hello, caller. Hello.
Yeah, hello.
Now we can hear you. The sound has come through our speakers. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. Yeah, I was just calling in, man, to thank the show for having Quilt Man and T on there. You know, there's some old friends of mine, and, you know, they've been singing the song, you know, for forever.
Yeah.
But it really does my heart. Of course, I always catch it for Cannabis Common Sense every week.
Thank
You know, so I never really know who's going to be on, but it always got something there for me. But this week, I want to thank Quiltman and T for letting me see them together again. You know, that's an old story there, but you know, to see them in that place there, it's a good sign.
It's a real honor to have them here. Really is.
Yeah, for the people. You know, that's the way they've always been, and that's the way you guys are too. So thanks a lot. This is Nash, by the way.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for calling, bro.
Yeah, so long. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, yeah, it's great to have Quilt Man.
Well, it's also ecstatic to discover that our government is waking up to some realities by not jumping in, like you said, and causing all these wonderful dispensaries that are springing up to be shut down, but they are still doing raids. Now, it's almost a bipolar situation. How does somebody who's involved in moving the marijuana movement, say that 10 times fast, forward, move forward by opening up a business and take the chance of getting medical marijuana to cannabis to patients and trying to get a bank account open for their business and being willing to pay taxes for their business, and
then to get arrested.
And then next thing you know, they get this fear of being shut down when they're doing an honest day's work.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's too scary for me. I have this aversion to metal boxes. I try to stay out of them. And so I've stayed away from that. I'm able to grow for patients, but I just give it to them for free. And I've been in very few dispensaries. So.
Well, we had Steve D'Angelo on the program this morning. He talked about how the marijuana movement had been singled out by the Justice Department and Homeland Security and the IRS.
I'm used to that.
Yes. And so it's like this big news that's going on.
It goes with the territory.
Yeah, it's not so big news to us, is it?
I've been in a constant state of audit for 10 years now. So.
And what do you do that's just so evil? Oh, you help people get their medical marijuana so they can see better, feel better, and get through the day with a better life.
I keep trying. When we do help, tens of thousands of patients every year all across America get their medical marijuana permits. And it's an honor to be able to help them and a great joy, and we're grateful for that.
And there are two things that you also do throughout the year that I think people need to realize is that you are a major sponsor of the Seattle Hemp Fest, and you are also the sponsor of the Portland Hemp Stock. And because of you, the voice of the marijuana movement is loud, proud, and strong.
I keep trying to add in as much as I can. In fact, as again I said, we did a little show just last week, a week ago from today, but it aired on KATU Channel 2, Portland's ABC affiliate. Last week we're going to run about a 3-minute segment from that 15-minute interview. You can see the whole thing on our website and our YouTube site.
You did a good job on the show, too.
Well, thank you. I
Yes,
appreciate
you did.
that. And you get to see a 3 minutes here, so enjoy. I think they're ready. It'll come rolling any second.
Legislature more time. And don't you think, Paul, that maybe a bill from the legislature would have more clout with the voters than as
Well, it
citizens
certainly
initiative?
would, and that's why we support a referral to the people by the legislature. And if they don't do it this July, then there's a short session next February, and we're hopeful that they'll do it then. If they do, then we don't need to go forward and put this on the ballot, but we want to be prepared if they don't, because we think the people are ready to vote on this. We just did a poll that showed that 63% of Oregonian voters, likely voters, are supporting taxing and regulating marijuana. The vote in Washington last November, 6 months ago, has changed the whole dynamic. Now, half the state is within an hour's drive of the Washington border, and we can legally cross the river here in Portland and be able to legally possess marijuana, and soon we'll be able to legally buy it. I don't think we should be sending our tax dollars into Washington's coffers. I think we have a lot of public programs here in Oregon and jobs in Oregon that we can keep here.
You touched upon those two initiatives. Can you kind of explain those in depth a little bit?
Sure. One of them is a constitutional amendment to allow the right for adults to possess, use, and grow marijuana to be added to the state constitution. It also allows the state to regulate it. The other one is a revision of last year's Measure 80, which would tax and regulate the sale of marijuana to adults over 21.
What did you learn from the failure of Measure 80?
We learned to make certain that the composition of the newly appointed Cannabis Commission is nonpartisan and not slanted toward anyone in the nascent marijuana industry. So we have all the members of the newly created Oregon Cannabis Commission appointed by the governor. So it won't be some people from the industry. That was a mistake in our last drive. We also have put a limit on the amount people can possess and grow for personal use without a license to match what the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program allows medical patients to have today.
Have you had any discussions with the governor about this at all, about his role in this Cannabis Commission?
You know, I have not directly had any conversations with the governor.
Anybody else you know that's talked to him and how he feels about this?
I'm not sure how he feels about it. You know, the governor doesn't have to sign a referral to the people. If the legislature passed a referral to the people, it goes directly there. You know, back in 1997, the Oregon legislature moved to criminalize the simple possession of marijuana. Oregon was the first state to decriminalize that in '73, and the governor signed that recriminalization bill into law. And we had to do a referendum to stop that from going into effect. And in fact, we won every county in the state and got 67% of the vote to stop the recriminalization of possession of less than an ounce of marijuana. So his history on marijuana is sketchy. You know, there's a lot of talk about the governor being a closet smoker back in the 70s. And we've addressed that on this show several times. I'm sure I have more than one indication that Governor Kitzhaber's not very happy with me talking about that.
Well, I would encourage everybody who's out there watching to roll up a joint and put it into an envelope and send it to the governor with a little message that says, "End prohibition."
I think a
against
letter,
this.
a handwritten letter would be more effective. You know, just write a letter, send it to the governor.
I want a joint
handwritten
effort.
letter. Keep your joint and smoke it yourself.
Oh,
Or
that's a good idea.
Give it to Casper. And but I think we should all send a letter to the governor, especially urging him to sign Senate Bill 281 as soon as possible, which adds post-traumatic stress patients to the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program. And urge him, if he has the opportunity, to sign House Bill 3640 to allow dispensaries and regulate them here in the state rather than having these people get arrested, as we talked about earlier in the show. And of course, if we can pass 3371, we'd love to see him sign that into law. I really believe that when some Democratic or some politician comes out and supports marijuana law reform, they're going to build the biggest coalition in several generations. You know, Franklin Roosevelt built the biggest coalition of Democratic voters that lasted for 30 years, a whole generation and a half, back in 1933 when he ended alcohol prohibition. And when some politicians, such as Earl Blumenauer here in Oregon or Jared Polis in Colorado, steps up and organizes on behalf of all us marijuana smokers, especially those in the closet too afraid to stand up because of where they live or what they're doing, that they will build a huge coalition that can dominate politics for a generation as well.
And
because that will mobilize us to come vote for them. And right now, when everyone wants to throw us in jail, why would you want to vote for them?
Exactly.
You know?
And
We have another caller, though. Let's take a call. Welcome to the show, caller.
This is Dr. Philip Levesque.
Hello, Dr. Philip Levesque.
I would like to take some credit for the PTSD legalization. I've been writing about this on my website, PTSD Levesque, for about 10 years
You
now.
have. I know you have. You definitely should. You've been educating people about that. You, being a World War II veteran, you have direct experience with traumatic stress.
I had 1,000 veteran PTSD patients, probably more than any other physician pharmacologist in this whole marijuana business.
Yeah, I know you have.
So people can go out and read some of your articles on salem-news.com. You're a regular contributor, and you have several articles there about PTSD. I know you appeared on our show.
Just punch up PTSD Levesque.
All right. Well, thank you, Doctor. Thanks for calling in.
Okay. Don't
All right.
smoke in the rain.
It'll get wet. So we have a number of show and tell items for you tonight. Let's see if our cameras are ready to go. We're going to start with this one brought in by ICO. It's big. It is a bottle of lavender pure Castile hemp soap. It says here that it's made with cannabis sativa.
Cool.
Cannabis sativa, ology, well-being, no harmful chemicals. Then next up, we have a number of antique items. We have 2 bottles that have the same thing, basically, little cannabis tablets. These are tablet titrates of cannabis, and they're from 1880, and the Boric Tafel pharmacists. And here is another one a little bit later. This one's from the 1890s. You know, some of these pills have turned to powder in there, but there are still some intact on the bottom. Then these are several items from Park Davis. This one is pretty interesting, and this also has some of the pills in here, but of course I'm not going to open these because these are 110 years old. But it's chlorodyne. Chlorodyne is a combination drug. It includes not just cannabis, and it's from Park Davis in Michigan. This is 1912, and it's chocolate-coated pills. Can you see those in there? Those are chocolate-coated pills. And these are not just cannabis, but morphine hydrochloride, and capsicum, the stuff in peppers, nitroglycerin, like they use for hearts today, and oil of peppermint. So morphine, cannabis, capsicum, nitroglycerin, and peppermint. And it doesn't list what it was used for on the bottle. This one, still wrapped in the original wax paper as well, and this one is about halfway full. It is from Park Davis again. This is cannabis, arsenic, and iron.
They keep putting arsenic in that stuff.
Arsenic and iron, yeah. They must have thought that was good for something. I don't know, you know, like 1914 with this one. This one's pretty clean. It's gelatin-coated pills. This one is cannabis digitalis and iron. Cannabis digitalis and iron. And on the back,
cannabis.
It says digitalis is another plant. Guaranteed by Park Davis under the Food and Drug Acts of June 30th, 1906. Guarantee number 6, 1906. And this is one of the smallest bottles we have. There's my thumb, you know, it's pretty small. And this is also a Park Davis medicine, still wrapped in the original wax paper in full, gelatin-coated cannabis extract tablets. Gelatin-coated, and it says from Park Davis. This is the last of the, there's some other antique medicine items. This is the last of the antique medicine items. This was actually a little box of marijuana.
Oh, that's cool.
And you can go in and get it at your pharmacist. It's the Earth contributes to L.L. Hopkins Distributors, Indian Cannabis.
That's a nice
common names: cannabis, cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, and cannabis americana. Its properties are a narcotic, a nerve sedative, an antispasmodic, an anodyne, and you take an infusion 1 ounce to a pint of water, and then your dose is take a dessert spoonful. So
cool.
You put an ounce of this marijuana into a pint of water, it says, and then take a spoonful.
Cool.
Spoonful of sugar will help the medicine go down with that, I think.
And it'll smell like sativa when you pass gas.
Exactly. Well, that's another. Okay, this is from 1565, and this is a page out of a book in Latin
that
talks about cannabis indica. There it is.
Paper?
I am not 100% certain, but most paper back then was made from rags, and most rags back then were hemp. So I think it is mostly probably hemp, but I don't have definite proof of that. Now this one is even older. It's from 1497, and it's been colored in. 1497, and it's in German, and it shows a nifty little marijuana plant there.
Isn't that when Dr. Levesque began practicing?
He had his 90th birthday here on our show just about, what was it?
10 years ago.
No, it was just a few weeks ago. Then he'd be 100 if it was. So you're trying to confuse me. Okay, this is nifty. This is also, I want to thank Eric for these 3 items here. And there's some actual locally made hemp paper as well.
Locally made?
Oh, he's got things printed on it.
Oh, cool.
This is an excerpt of the February 1937 edition of Popular Mechanics. And it talks about hemp, the new billion-dollar crop. I didn't realize you had stuff printed on this till I picked it up.
Ain't it nice?
Yeah, that's nice.
Gorgeous.
That is nice. That's an excerpt from Popular Mechanics talking about hemp. And ironically, about 2 months before this article came out, they criminalized hemp. So isn't that ironic? There's more things on here. This is the cover of that Popular Mechanics article. Looks like he has some embedded big leaves.
Oh, those
Very
are pretty.
big leaves. What's this last one got on? Gosh golly. Oh! Okay. What do you call farmers who grow a crop that can help solve our energy and reforestation problems? Criminals.
That's right.
Okay. Again, this is from the Lakota Nation and there's a movie about Alex Whiteplume, who planted a hemp crop, and it is Standing Silent Nation, a documentary featuring Prairie Dust Films, and you can find out more at Prairie Dust Films. But Alex Whiteplume had the DEA descend on him after the Lakota Nation tried to allow him to grow hemp. Now, there's an interesting story about that, and I recommend you see that movie, Standing Silent Nation. Last but not least, before we go to our next phone call, it is Hemp History Week, starting on Monday from June 3rd. I think it's till June 9th. Hemp History Week. It's being celebrated all over the country. Every New Seasons and every Whole Foods store here in the Portland area and probably throughout the country have displays about hemp food. You can buy hemp seed, you can buy hemp bread, you can buy hemp cereal, and one of my favorites, you can buy hemp milk. Hemp milk is really good and tasty. And anyway, so NACA, though, Wonder Knack is a wonderful artist who has an incredible portfolio and has worked with a lot of reggae artists, and she has opened a store in Multnomah Village called NACA Hemp Gear. And she's also celebrating Hemp History Week on June 7th. So I recommend going there on June 7th and spending lots of money and supporting Wonder Knack, because she's a good lady. And here's, thank you, Aiko, copy of the next version of the Oregon Cannabis Tax Act.
Oh, the lawyers will love it. It's written in small print.
Last but not least, just a close-up on this, please. This is a little flyer about Hemp History Week. It's the 4th annual Hemp History Week. It says on the back that Dr. Andrew Weil and Weil, lots of different people. Michael Fronte, Ziggy Marley, of course, and others support Hemp History Week. It's a little flyer. If you go to any of these places, New Seasons, Whole Foods. I picked this up today at Whole Foods on Burnside.
Everybody in that pamphlet smiling.
I know, they must be happy. And there's Andrew Weil.
That's him.
Okay, Weil, not Wheel. Weil.
Yeah,
Weil or Wheel.
All the while we're watching.
He's Wiley.
Yeah.
All right. We have phone callers galore standing by. Welcome to the show, callers.
Hi, Paul.
Howdy.
I called you in 2009 and asked you a question about staying legal after your harvest when you have way over your limit.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a mattress bag thing.
Yeah,
and
just leaving it legal as one plant, not trimming it down. And yeah, I've done that in the past.
And how long can you store it in those bags?
It's, it deteriorates about 10% a year. So, you can store it as long as you want, but it's not going to be, the longer you wait, the less active it will be.
Okay, can you go over the method on how you do that again?
Well, I just take the whole plant and hang the whole plant. And then I take that plant and put it into one of these mattress bags and then just wrap it up and store it as a whole plant. It still counts as one of its plants. And I've done that in the past to
And you can't be growing another one. That counts as your one, right? Or your one.
Yeah, that counts as one of your plants, exactly, while it's being stored that way. But it's obvious when it's all held together that that's one plant. Don't break up those stems. I dig down a little bit and then cut mine a little below the dirt line and then just hang that whole massive thing. Sometimes the stems are that big around, you know. Hang that whole massive thing up and then let it dry for 2 or 3 weeks and trim off what I can give to patients, and what I don't have extra, put it in a bag and store it until the patients need it.
Okay, one more question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What do you do with powdery mildew?
Once it's turned powdery mildew, you can wash that out by putting it in one of these ice hash extraction bags. It has a very fine screen across the bottom that allows everything smaller than a trichrome to go through. And then you rinse it with water until it rinses clean water through there, and you stir it. It breaks it down into a pulp. But all of the resin and everything will stay in there, and you keep rinsing it until you clean it and taking the mold and mildew out.
What about while they're growing?
Oh, I recommend, if it's not too soon till harvest, use neem oil. Neem oil is a non-poisonous nut extract from South Asia that has beneficial properties for humans, but it kills bugs. So neem oil, also diatomaceous earth, that's less toxic than table salt. In fact, what I do is I mix neem oil, a hydrophobic extract of neem oil, takes all the solids out, with diatomaceous earth, and you spray that on there, and that's a completely non-toxic way to kill the bugs. And put a little diatomaceous earth on the ground or the floor around the plants as well. You don't want to breathe that stuff, but if you take it orally, it's not toxic at all.
Okay, where does powdery mildew originate from? Is it in the soil,
The air.
or is it?
The air. It's in the air, and if you have a lot of moisture and contamination, it'll take off.
So does it like neutral, or is it more likely to?
It's not good for your breathing system. It's bad for your lungs, so you want to clean it out. You really can't smoke it once it's mildew, unless you rinse it out and then take that extract.
Understand. Okay, thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. You know, speaking of growing cannabis, we have a video with George Cervantes. Jorge Cervantes is the author of Marijuana Horticulture, a Portland, Oregon resident in the past. He's been in Spain for a decade and one of the premier authorities on cannabis cultivation. He's been a guest on this show. We have a little film clip from him. We'll be back in just a moment.
So, you've made the harvest, the buds are hanging, you've done the trimming. What do you have left? All this leaf. What are you going to do with this? Smoke it? I don't think so when you've got all those great buds. So, let's make some hash out of it. We're going to take 100 grams and make 10 grams of hash. Some of this hash will be very, very high quality. How are we going to do it? With water, cold water. What we've got is green matter that has a water base, and then on it is resin. Resin has an oil base. Well, the two do not mix, and that's the key to what we're going to do today. We've got a complete array of 8 swag bags that Kind Seed was nice enough to loan us. These bags are going to be the key to everything, because as you can see, they've got a screen on the bottom, and that's the secret. What I have here is called the work bag. The reason we call it a work bag is because it's the first bag that the shake is put into. And this is where the bulk of the green matter will wind up. This comes in a size called 220 microns. Then progressively, they get smaller and smaller. First, we have to take the work bag and set it inside this 5-gallon bucket. Then we'll take ice in order to keep everything cold, nice and cold. Take a little bit more ice, put it in the bag. Next, we'll put in a little bit of water. Not too much water. We'll put the leaf in slowly. The idea is to make sure everything gets very, very wet. And in order to do that, we'll mix about half the leaf with the ice and water. Okay. But we're mixing that water and the ice and the leaf together so everything gets exceptionally wet. Now we'll put in a little bit more ice. And the balance of the leaf we will do this with water, pure water, that comes from reverse osmosis. This water has very, very few dissolved solids in it, or salts. That's a contaminant for your hash. And I'm mixing this by hand to make sure everything gets nice and wet and all of the foliage is totally saturated. What we need to do is agitate the water, leaf, and resin in order for the resin to separate from the leaf. And to do this, let's use this small little egg beater, electric egg beater that we find in most kitchens. As we're mixing everything up really good, I'll pull the bag up. I want to make everything mix really, really well. But at the same time, what I want to do is I want to make sure that the hash or the resin settles. And it settles through the sieve at the bottom. This is really important. So just sit back and wait for us to come back, because what we've got is another 10 minutes of blending. We're at about 15 minutes now with this cold leaf, and we'll see what happens. We're going to have to let it settle down through the sieve in the bottom of this bag. Look at that dough. Let's just knock this off of here. And oh boy, it just feels a lot different. Feels like all the resin's in the bottom of the bag. What we'll do now is stack these bags inside of this bucket, and notice that we're starting with the 23 micron size, the smallest of the small screens. I'm just kind of shaking it easily. Anything that's down there will just come right on up. And just keep the same jigging action all the way up. Now I'm up at the top. Okay. See, I've got water draining out the bottom. Whoa, look at the color of that water. So I'm just straining this out, giving it a good squeeze. So it dries right up. I want to get everything out of there. I'm jigging this bag up and down so as to let the water fall through and the resin remain. What we've got is a little bit of resin down there that we've washed up. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture that resin, grab it, squeeze the water out of it, and set it up here on this piece of cardboard. Let's bring another bag out and see what we've got. We've got a nice little bit of hash down there. Notice it takes a little...
There you have it. Well, thank you, Jorge Cervantes. And this just segued perfectly into that last caller's question, which it just must have meant to be. We are down to about 2 minutes, and we're going to go out. You want to say anything in closing?
I did make a point to tune in to AmericanFreedomRadio.com Monday through Friday, 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific Standard, and tell your friends to, whenever you can, to take Time for Hemp.
And if you or a loved one or someone you know needs medical marijuana, we can help them all across the country. We have a physician referral service, clinics across the country. If you need help, then we can help you. Call us at 1-800-723-0188. anywhere in the United States. That's 1-800-723-0188. Also, you can call our local number, 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. Also call us if you want to get involved in ending marijuana prohibition, which is another thing we're working on. So call us at that local number if you want to work on our initiatives to end marijuana prohibition. We're going to go out with Quilt Man and T with a final song. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. It's a real honor to have you here. Thank you, Bob. Thank you.